Hello everyone. I welcome all of you to YuktMind's unique initiative 10 minutes and newspaper done. Since Mains 2023 is just 2 months away and Prelims 2024 is less than an year away, let us help you save your time in reading newspaper so that you can focus on the vast static content better. This is 4th July the Hindu discussion and you can download the PDF from our Telegram channel or website Daily Current Affairs tab. First news, Indian refiners to start paying in yuan, that is Chinese currency, for Russian oil. Now, this news comes under the topic of India-Russia bilateral relations under GS paper 2. Indian refiners have begun paying for some oil imports from Russia in Chinese yuan, as Western sanctions force Moscow and its customers to find alternatives to the dollar for settling payments. Western punishments over Russia's invasion of Ukraine have shifted global trade flows for its top export, with India emerging as the largest buyer of seaborne Russian oil, even as it casts about for how to pay for it amid shifting sanctions. Second news, Supreme Court is becoming more tech savvy. Now this news comes under the topic of judiciary as it is trying to upgrade itself under GS paper 2. The Supreme Court reopened after the summer vacation to tech savvy paperless courtrooms with free Wi-Fi for everyone. The new courtroom decor has big screens for virtual hearings. Digital enhancements have been implemented as part of green initiatives for optimum use of technology in justice delivery systems. There is a related news event happening in Odisha simultaneously where 50 more courts turned paperless, turning the total number of such courts in the state to 84. Recognizing the importance of technology in the justice delivery system, the then Chief Justice of India, Uday Umesh Lalit, inaugurated 34 paperless courts covering all 30 districts in the Odisha state. Third news, Center announces scheme to support minor rape victims. Now this news comes under the topic of welfare schemes for vulnerable sections of the population by the center under GS paper 2. Recognizing the trauma faced by minor rape victims, the union government has decided to provide medical, financial, and infrastructure support to victims in cases where the sexual assault results in pregnancies. The special scheme announced by the Women and Child Development Ministry would operate under the aegis of the Nirbhaya Fund, and an amount of 74.1 crore rupees has been allocated. We have additionally leveraged the administrative structure of Mission Vatsalya in collaboration with the state government and childcare institutions to actualize this support to minor victims. Mission Vatsalya has been covered in detail on 3rd July the Hindu discussion, and you can find the PDF in the Telegram channel. The government had already accelerated access to justice for minor victims of rape by establishing 415 POCSO fast-track courts in the country. This additional support would be available to the level of childcare institutions up to the age of 18 and thereafter up to the age of 23. This scheme aims to provide integrated support to girl-child victims under one roof. Fourth news, Election Commission portal for political parties to file financial accounts. Now this news comes under the topic of powers, functions and responsibilities of various constitutional bodies like Election Commission here under GS paper 2. All political parties will now be able to file their financial accounts online, with the Election Commission launching a new web portal to facilitate the same. The online availability of the data is expected to enhance the level of compliance and transparency. Now, we should also know that Election Commission launched electoral bonds to increase the financial transparency of the political parties. The Commission said that in case any outfit did not wish to file their financial records in the online mode, they would have to give a justification for it, which the Election Commission would publish on its website for the benefit of the voters. Fifth news, India should refuse America's NATO plus bait. Now, this is an opinion article of an expert on NATO, and this comes under the topic of bilateral, regional, and global groupings and agreements involving India or affecting India's interests in GS paper 2. It was during a virtual press briefing in March 2023 on the NATO's focus on South Asia and the Indo-Pacific region that the United States permanent representative to NATO was quoted as saying that the NATO alliance is open to more engagement should India seek that. Reflecting the same sentiment, the US House Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the USA and the Chinese Communist Party in May 2023 recommended strengthening the NATO Plus framework by including India in the grouping. But India's External Affairs Minister Jaishankar had rejected this idea by saying that NATO template does not apply to India. Let's first discuss NATO and NATO Plus. What is NATO? NATO is a transatlantic military alliance of 31 countries, especially led by USA, with the majority of members from Europe. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, many thought that NATO would lose its relevance. On the contrary, NATO has not only survived but also expanded, with Finland joining as its 31st member and Sweden waiting in the wings. NATO appears to be getting the much needed ground for survival thanks to Russia's tirade against it and the invasion of Ukraine. With NATO swelling its expanse, some analysts even see the onset of Cold War 2.0. Now, what is NATO Plus? It refers to a security arrangement of NATO and the five treaty allies of the USA, that is, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Israel, and South Korea, as members to enhance global defense cooperation and win the strategic competition with the Chinese Communist Party. Interestingly, the term NATO Plus is not an officially recognized or established concept within NATO, but has been used in discussions and debates regarding the potential expansion of the alliance. The inclusion of these countries as members would require a complex process of negotiation and assessment of their compatibility with NATO's principles, obligations, and defense commitments. While NATO's earlier target was the Soviet Union and now Russia, the focus of NATO Plus is clearly on containing China. In light of increasing regional security challenges, India joining the NATO Plus framework could provide it with a security umbrella with protection and deterrence against potential threats. India could also gain access to advanced military technologies, intelligence sharing platforms, and interoperability with other member states. This could potentially strengthen India's defense capabilities and modernization efforts. So, why should India avoid NATO plus status? First, getting into any NATO framework will annoy Russia and China. Apart from the robust strategic partnership, Russia has been useful to India in dealing with regional security challenges and moderating the stance of China. Second, while aligning with a US led alliance system may be tempting due to the threats posed by China, it could ultimately prove counterproductive and detrimental. At a time when India has its own bilateral issues with China and a strategy for the Indo Pacific, hopping into the Taiwan strategy of the US under NATO Plus will complicate India's security with the possibility of Chinese justification for further military buildup along the Indo China border and frequent intrusion. Third, India has traditionally maintained a policy of strategic autonomy, allowing it to engage with various nations and blocs based on its own interest. Now, note this term strategic autonomy, which you can use in your mains answers. Joining a NATO framework would require India to align its defense and security policies with the objectives and strategies of the alliance, thereby potentially undermining India's autonomy. It could also strain relationships with countries, especially neighbors and regional organizations, that value India's independent stance and could also limit its flexibility in engaging with other regional powers. Now, what is India's priorities? India's priorities lie in addressing its own regional dynamics that includes a unique set of security challenges such as border disputes, terrorism, and regional conflicts. While NATO has certain competencies to deal with such issues, its larger geopolitical agenda may divert resources and attention away from these pressing issues and therefore will not be of much help to India. For the time being, India's posturing through the Quad, that is India, Japan, Australia, and the USA, also known as Asian NATO by the China, looks more promising than the NATO plus bait, though China remains an elephant in the room during its summits. Sixth news is again an expert's opinion on global stock take. The Bonn Climate Change Conference was the last big milestone in climate negotiations before the first global stock take under the Paris Agreement at COP28 in Dubai in December 2023. Now, this news comes under the topic of bilateral, regional, and global groupings and agreements involving India under GS paper 2. It also comes under the topic environmental conservation under GS paper 3. The global stocktake is mandated under Article 14, Clause 1 of the Paris Agreement to assess collective progress towards long-term global goals like greenhouse gas reduction, securing finance to address climate crisis. The two agenda items, first is mitigation pathways compatible with the temperature goal, and second is climate finance flows from developed countries to developing countries to enable them to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. Now, both of these remain point of contention between the developing countries and the Environmental Integrity Group represented by the European Union and others. The signal from the Bonn conference was that developing countries too need to be more ambitious in their emission reduction. Climate change negotiators arrived on a compromise on one of the aspects which relates to the work program on just transition pathways. The parties to the Paris Agreement had introduced just transition pathways at COP27. India's climate policy is derived from the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. In its long term low emission development strategy at COP27, India underlined the need for financing a just transition in sectors such as energy and transport in order to reach net zero emissions by 2070. Now, what is just transition pathways? Just transition means that the transformational pathways need to be carried out in a way that is as fair and inclusive as possible to everyone concerned. India stated that the route to just transition needs to be clubbed with the means of implementation. The adoption of the just transition pathways in the draft text of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, that is UNFCCC's subsidiary body of implementation, is also aligned with the Paris Agreement stand, which is self-differentiation grounded in the idea of nationally determined contributions. So, this is a bottom up approach which was inserted in the Paris Agreement with the idea of allowing developing countries which face special needs and circumstances to align their low carbon development pathways that integrate socio-economic components in line with the state determined development priorities. Now, there are several issues with mobilizing finance, like in the domain of international money transfers, accounting remains highly contested. Many observers say that only a fraction of the $100 billion has actually been realized, whereas at the 2009 Copenhagen Climate Change Conference, 2020 was made the deadline for developed countries to jointly mobilize $100 billion a year for climate finance for developed countries. Also, adaptation finance has lagged behind mitigation finance. So, in the efforts towards aligning climate finance with the Paris Agreement temperature goals, it is important to integrate the World Bank in climate change negotiations and hold it accountable. This is a UPSC past year question of 2017 prelims. The question was with reference to Global Climate Change Alliance, which of the following statements are correct? So here third statement was wrong, that is it was not coordinated by World Resource Institute and World Business Council for Sustainable Development. So if you eliminate 3, you can go to the option A, that is 1 and 2. The Global Climate Change Alliance is an initiative of the European Union. Its overall objective is to build a new alliance on climate change between the European Union and the poor developing countries. Seventh news. According to the report of the Commissioner of Railway Safety submitted to the Railway Ministry, the triple train collision took place owing to lapses in the signalling circuit alteration. Now, this news comes under the topic disaster due to anthropogenic reasons under GS paper 3. Thank you for watching. If you find the video beneficial, do subscribe to our channel and keep visiting our website, Telegram, Instagram and Twitter.